Hello, everybody, and welcome to Getting APIs to Work. Today we have Tobias Polley with us of Predicate. Hey, Tobias, thanks for joining.
Hi, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, you joined because you just published a book. Congratulations for that. It's called the API Gateway Handbook, and it talks about how to use API gateways, what to do with them. It provides some patterns and examples. But briefly, just explain to us, why did you write this? It's a fairly substantial book, right? It's 200 pages. It's available for free, by the way. We'll link to it later on. But why did you write this book?
Yeah, it is substantial. Yeah. It's a funny story. At one customer, the management said, "Well, go use APIs," and the technicians, yeah, and the technicians they came to us and asked us to set up an API gateway. And actually, when we came back 2 years later, there were 2 million warnings unread in the system. Yeah, so not too good in that situation. Well, the API gateway wasn't doing much anyway, so it wasn't too bad. But basically, my message basically is, if you get an API gateway, think very hard why you actually need it and compare products based on your requirements.
Yeah, that is a very good starting point. I've lived through that also many times with when people say we want a gateway, and then you ask them why, and then they kind of look at you in a slightly confused way. So, what are the topics that you're covering in your book?
Yeah. Yeah, it's as you said, it's substantial and it's very many small sections. And so for example, we talk about design patterns, how you use API gateways, how you whether you do redundancy with them, how you deploy them, how you get them up and running, what features are usually contained in API gateways. And the book is actually partitioned in two parts. So the first part is a very general part based on API gateways in general. And the second part focuses on our own software. We are a little bit biased, I have to admit there. And it's an open source API gateway called Membrane API Gateway. Yeah.
But in that case, the first part is very well suited for anybody using an API gateway because it shows patterns of what you might want to do. And it also explains for you what the value is that you get from these patterns, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. So I think it's, that's a very good way of segmenting that book as well, because then people might just want to be interested in
In the
those
first part.
general parts. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then, but of course, everybody should use Membrane. Go ahead and do it. But if you don't, the book is still useful.
Honestly, I'd say please check your requirements.
Thanks. That is really nice. Yes. So first, figure out why you want one, and then start with
Yes.
selecting one. So let's just look at two brief examples. What level basically the book is at, what you're recommending to people, what they can understand and get out of the book. So you have prepared two examples. One is about validating messages, so making sure that the traffic that goes across your gateway really is looking as it should be looking.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's basically for a security feature that you probably want to activate for APIs which are basically very vulnerable, which are usually APIs which can be accessed anonymously. Yeah, if you know your 5 partner companies, that's not that much of interest to you usually, although of course you can do that. And the interesting part is that when the HTTP request comes into your company, you want to check it. And the OpenAPI definition and specification, they allow you to add very little details or very, very fine-grained constraints on the HTTP requests. For example, you could set a maximum length on some fields, or you can specify a regular expression. And while that might sound like the tiny bit of information, it actually helps you keep your server very much more secure else compared to otherwise. And so what you can do is you write your OpenAPI. Hopefully you're doing it anyway, and then you're taking that and you're putting it into the API gateway, and you can bundle them together. You can set up a workflow, an automated workflow for that. It's usually people call that APIOps. And then they deploy their API gateway. And of course, before the OpenAPI definition comes into the gateway, you probably want to review it automatically and manually, depending on what to look for. Yeah.
Okay, so that sounds like a really useful pattern. And thanks a lot for pitching OpenAPI. That is dear to my heart. So it's always good to hear people saying why you should be using OpenAPI. So that's a good example. And then the second example is a little different. We are looking at token validation and how that is something that a gateway can easily do, and at scenarios where that might be useful. Talk us a little bit through your scenario there, please.
Yeah. So usually you're using Auth2 or OpenID Connect to basically to get a token and to access your API. And of course, if you look at the security component of that, the main part basically is that if you take just one of your tokens, it's not valid for all of your 1,000 APIs, because if it were that would be a very bad thing. And the other thing, it's not valid forever. Yeah, because if you lose it, basically and 5 minutes are over, maybe you're in a good position again because it has run out of time. And so what you of course can do is basically your API request comes in, and basically your API hopefully already checks whether the token is valid or not, and checks whether the token is meant for this specific API or not. And so of course the API gateway, what it basically does is it repeats exactly that check. So you might think, well, why do I need to do it twice? It doesn't make sense, right? Well, the thing is, there's an interesting story related to Microsoft's token signing keys. About 2 years ago, there was this small incident where, I don't know, I just read the press. The press says Chinese got hold of Microsoft's 8th token signing key. Yeah, so 7 of them were good, but the 8th one was bad. And so, depending on which tokens you were using, you maybe you had a problem or not. And the question is, well, how do you roll out the policy? Don't allow tokens with Microsoft's 8th key. How do you roll that out to your 1,000 APIs? How do you remove the 8th key from your 1,000 APIs? And the answer just is you don't. Yeah, because basically, I mean, maybe restarting them helps. So good luck with restarting 1,000 APIs. Yeah. And maybe, but maybe you have to change their configuration. Yeah, and so I would suggest just make a policy, put an API gateway in front of your 1,000 APIs, make the policy all requests have to go through this API gateway, and then you have this basically natural point where you can roll out the policy of checking which key was used to sign the token. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So I think that's a very good example then as well for how it allows you to centralize certain things that otherwise you would have to manage in a relatively not so scalable way. Let's put it this way. So yeah, I think so. These are 2 examples of how an API gateway may be interesting for you.
Yeah.
You have many more, right? Let's
yes. The interesting part is that you can combine these 2 even. Yeah. So I mean the OpenAPI specification allows you basically on a per endpoint basis to specify which scopes, it's called, the caller has to have in order for them to be allowed to call the endpoint. And usually, I mean, the term scopes is a little bit interesting because it's very old and it has never changed. From my point of view, it usually is used in a different way. Let's talk about user groups maybe, because that gets much closer to that, or maybe permissions even. And so the interesting part is that if you already have your OpenAPI and it's already annotated with the scopes, the gateway basically can act naturally and check these token scopes on a per endpoint basis. And this way, basically, you have an additional authorization check, and that's worth very, very much, and it protects you against certain attacks. And that's, from my point of view, it's always interesting when you get protection from a class of attacks with a very simple solution.
Yeah, I think that's a good point here, right? In the end, it's always a little bit of a balancing of how much do I have to spend and how much effort does it take me to prevent certain things from happening, and what are the risks that I'm securing against. And I think you have some really good patterns that help people to find these things that help them a fair bit without too much effort. Okay, so
Absolutely.
your book, it just came out. It's available through LeanPub and on your webpage, right? Through these two sources. We'll add some links,
Yeah.
and then everybody
And
have a look. You can check it out. Um, Somebody should pay for this. I know that you can have it for free right now, but if you find it useful, consider maybe even paying money for it, right? I think
I
it's
mean,
one of the.
if you liked it, you can buy a second copy then.
There you go. I think that would be a good way of doing that. Okay. Thanks a lot, Tobias, for joining the channel. Do you have any final words for us, like a word of motivation maybe for people?
Well, please make a list with your API gateway requirements and compare them to the products. That would be really my advice. Thank you so much, Eric.
What you want to do, and then think about how you get it done. I think that's a very good word. Okay. Thanks again. Thanks everybody for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing. And with that, we're done for today. Bye, everybody, and keep getting APIs to work. Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks, Eric.